Today's daf is Chulin daf Chaf Gimel, and we are 7 lines from the bottom of daf Chaf Gimel Amid Aleph. So the topic has been Shchita, specifically Shchitas Chulin. Stating that, the Gemara digressed, and the Gemara went from discussing Shchitas Chulin to Malikas Ha'oif. Malika was very similar to Shchita. Anytime a carbon was brought in the form of an oif, a Chatas Ha'oif or an Oilas Ha'oif, rather than doing Shchita with the oif, what was done was Malika. And there was a Mishnah and Gemaras that discussed some of the halachas of Malika, specifically comparing and contrasting Shchitas Oif Chulin versus Malikas Oif Kacha. Once the Mishnah mentioned Malika, the Mishnah digressed and discussed the birds that are kosher to be brought as an oif in the Beis Hamikdash, specifically Toirim or Bnei Yoina. And the Mishnah mentioned kosher b'Toirim, pasal b'Bnei Yoina, kosher b'Bnei Yoina, pasal b'Toirim. Then the Gemara discussed, so what exactly are those shiurim? Meaning, when does a bird become kosher to be brought as a tar? When does a bird become kosher to be brought as a ben Yoina? And then the Mishnah and the Gemara discussed an in-between stage, what's called Tchilas Hatziyuv. And the Gemara wasn't sure if that shiur of Tchilas Hatziyuv, which seems to be some in-between stage as far as the maturation of the bird goes, is it a shiur that we're just not sure about, or is a berya b'fnei atzmai? Regardless, along the theme of the digression of the Gemara, Reb Zeira is going to ask another shaila which has nothing to do with Masechtas Chulin, but it jives with the digression of the Gemara. Boy, Reb Zeira, ha'omer harei olai oilas behema. If somebody says he's going to bring a carbon oila as an adava, it's going to be a behema, and then he got specific. He said min ha'ayil or min ha'keves. He wants it to be either from an ayil or from a keves. Now, a sheep, the first 12 months of its life, a male sheep that is called a keves. The first month of the second year of its life, meaning the 13th month of its life, it's what's known as a palgas. After that, it gets known as an ayil. Now, this person said he's going to bring it min ha'ayil or min ha'keves. So keves would mean that it's 0 to 12 months. Ayil would mean it's 13 months forward. What he didn't mention was palgas. Says Reb Zeira, what would happen if this person was heavy b'palgas? So he brought a palgas. Was he yoitza or was he not yoitza? He said keves or ayil. He didn't say palgas. So at first glance you would think he can't fulfill his nether by bringing a palgas. Says the Gemara like this. Reb Zeira explained, according to Rabbi Yochanan, I have no shaila. The Amar who holds Ber Yehava, he's of the opinion that a palgas is not a suffix, this in-between stage, whether it's a keves or an ayil, but rather it's a separate stage. There's a stage called palgas. How do I know that? At the time we learned in the Mishnah, krivu, maybe all of niskei ayil. If somebody brings a palgas as a oilas nadava, so he has to bring nesachim together with his behema. How much nesachim does he bring? So he brings the same nesachim that you would bring if you were bringing an ayil. So a keves had its share v'yasahin. The ayil had its share, which was a shlisha sahin, in the event that he's bringing a palgas, so it's a mishnah mesachtes para, so he has to bring the sachim. How much nesachim does he bring? He brings the nesachim of the ayil. But at the same time, if he said that he was going to bring an ayil, he can't fulfill his neder by bringing this palgas. Regardless, Rabbi Yochanan said that, how do you know that the amount of nesachim that you're supposed to bring together with a palgas is the same as the amount of nesachim that you bring when you bring an ayil? He learned it from a pasuk. It says oyla ayil, and from the word oy, he said l'rabbi says a palgas. Now, if you have a pasuk that's being marba, the nesachim that you're supposed to bring for a palgas, what do you see from there? That a palgas is not a suffix. It's not pshat. We don't know what a palgas is. Is it really a keves, like an animal is for the first 12 months of its life? Or is it really an ayil, like it's going to be from 13 months forward? Because if it's this suffix, then the Torah doesn't have to talk about sveika. It's like Rashi said on the bottom on Daf Chav Beis Amid Beis. Umi ikka sveika kami kucha b'rich. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a suffix. So why does the Torah have to address a suffix? Elamai a palgas is not a suffix. What a palgas must be, it's a berya b'fnei atzmai. It must be this in between stage. There's keves, there's palgas, and there's ayil. If that's the case, it's pashit. Said Reb Zeira. Ha'omer arei olai oilas behema min ayil min keves. He can't bring min a palgas because a palgas is not an ayil. It's not a keves. What was Reb Zeira's shayla? My shayla is according to Bar Pada, who explained that Mishnah a little bit differently. Again, the Mishnah had said that if somebody brings a palgas, he brings the nesachin of an ayil. Rabbi Yochanan said, how do you know that? You know that from a pasuk. But Bar Pada said something else. He said, maisi umasni, that really what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to bring the nesachin of a palgas, and you're supposed to make a tanai. Pasha, what's the Tanai? The Tanai is, I'm not sure if what this palgus is. If the palgus is a keves, so then the Revi'ah Sahin that I have to bring, because I'm bringing a keves, that should be Kaddish, and whatever's extra should really be Chulin. And if it's an ayil, then everything should be Kaddish. But, so what was Rav Zera Shai? Let's before Bar Pada, right? Bar Pada is clearly saying that it's a suffix. Otherwise, why are you making a Tanai? No, but the Shaila Rav Zera had was, what is the nature of the Tanai? Rav Zera wanted to know what the text of the Tanai is. Mi Amrina, do we say the Tanai is Ba'ayil Bekeves Masna Beberia Loy Masna? That when he makes this Tanai, there's only two stadim that he has to take into consideration. I'm not sure if this is a Keves, I'm not sure if it's an ayil. Or either more, perhaps there's a third side. Beberia Nami Masna. He has to really say three things. I don't know if this is a keves. If it is, then I want the Revi'ah Sahin to be Kaddish. Anything above that should be Chulin. If it's an ayil, I want it all to be Kaddish. And maybe it's a palgus, and if it's a palgus, I don't have that oy that Rabbi Yochanan had. The Torah never addressed in a sachan of a palgus, which means you don't bring any nesachan at all. And if you don't bring any nesachan at all, then the Tanai is going to be that all of it should be Chulin. But regardless, Reb Zera understood in Bar Pada, that Bar Pada learned that it's not a beria b'fnei atzmai for sure, because if it's for sure beria b'fnei atzmai, then we would know what you're supposed to do within the sachim, that you wouldn't be making this Tanai. But he was clearing whether Bar Pada had a tzad that it's a beria b'fnei atzmai, or he didn't even have a tzad that it's a beria b'fnei atzmai. Meaning Bar Pada, who holds that if somebody brings a palgus, he has to make tnoyim, because they're not really sure what you're supposed to do within the sachim. How many tzadim are we trying to juggle is according to Bar Pada? Is it maybe it's a keves, maybe it's an ayil, or is it maybe it's a keves, maybe it's an ayil, and even a third side, maybe it's a beria, and for that, Reb Zera said, Teiku. Either way, by Reb Zera. Again, me'inyan le'inyan, ba'isa inyan. Ha'imar like lachmi toida, min ha'chametz, oy min ha'matzah. If somebody says he wants to bring lachmi toida as a carpet, and he says that I wanted to bring either min ha'chametz or min ha'matzah. So he seems to have covered all the possibilities, right? No, the heavy siur, and he brought it in the state of siur. Is he yoitza his obligation of bringing the lachmi toida that he said he was going to bring, or can he not fulfill his obligation of lachmi toida? So what is seer? So seer is discussed in a Gemara Masechtas Pesachim, as you would expect, and it's a machlekes Ramei and Reb Yehuda. A, what exactly seer is, and B, how you're supposed to treat seer in halacha. So matzah is unleavened bread. You take dough and water, put it in an oven, you're going to get matzah. If you add yeast or some other agent that causes the dough to rise, then what you're going to end up with is chametz. Seer is when dough is in the midst of rising, but this process hasn't been completed. So it's nishtahin nishtaher. It's not matzah because you added yeast, you added something to cause the dough to rise, but at the same time, it hasn't fully risen. Thus, lahalacha yesh lachkar. How do you look at dough like this? Do you treat it as matzah or do you treat it as chametz? And it's machlekes Ramei Rabbi Yehuda. Rameir says that the way you look at seir is you look at it as chametz. However, whereas chametz ordinarily is chayv kares, koloicho machmetzes v'nicher so nefesh himi Yisrael. If somebody eats seir, he's only going to get malchus. Rabbi Yehuda agrees that the way you look at seir as being chametz, but Rabbi Yehuda says there's no kares if somebody eats seir. Additionally, there's no malchus if somebody eats seir as well. So seir is for sure not going to be treated as full-fledged chametz. The question is if somebody eats seir on Pesach, what happens? According to Rabbi Meir, it's a chayv 11. It's still very, very chamer. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not even that chamer. It's aser, but there's no kares, and there's not even going to be malchus. So Rabbi Meir takes a much more stringent position as far as what the halach is if somebody eats seir. But there's another machlekes from Rabbi Yehuda, and that is what exactly is seir. Rabbi Meir says that as soon as the dough changes color, so apparently as dough rises, two things happen. Number one, the color of the dough changes. It takes on a pale color as it starts rising. Number two, it starts developing cracks. And that's considered the process of the dough rising, and that's when we have to start viewing this halacha not as matzah anymore, but now as chametz. According to Rabbi Meir, as soon as the dough starts changing colors, it's already called seir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that would not be seir. In order for it to be called seir, the cracks have to start developing. Another chumrah that Rabbi Meir has over Rabbi Yehuda. So, according to Rabbi Meir, as soon as the dough changes colors, it's already seir. That's chumrah number one. It's a very early stage when we look at it as seir. Chumrah number two, if you eat seir, you get malchus. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it doesn't become seir until it starts developing cracks. That's a kula. And number two, the second kula is even if somebody eats seir, he's not going to get malchus. So again, Rabbi Zera cleared the shayla. If somebody said, "Arei lachmi toida min hachametz oy min hamatzah," and he brought seer, is he yoitza or is he not yoitza? So the Gemara says, let's see. Seer the man, who are we going according to? Is seer the Rab Meir, the Rab Yehuda? Do we mean what Rab Meir calls seer, and we're declaring the shayla, leave it to Rab Yehuda? What did Rab Meir call seer? As soon as the dough changes colors. What does Rab Yehuda hold about such seer? It's matzah. Rab Yehuda holds it doesn't become seer until it starts developing cracks. It's matzah ma'al, you say. It's regular matzah. Either Rab Yehuda or Rab Meir. Do we mean what Rab Yehuda called seer, and we're declaring the shayla according to Rab Meir? What's Rab Yehuda seer? It started developing cracks. What does Rab Meir hold seer is? As soon as it changes colors. According to Rab Meir, if it develops cracks, it's regular chametz. And chametzu, then it's regular chametz. And then Rab Zera has no shayla. V'either Rab Meir or Rab Meir. Elamai, maybe we mean Rab Meir seer according to Rab Meir. Rab Meir seer is when it changes colors. What's the halacha according to Rab Meir by such seer? You get malchus, says the Gemara, but the lucky allow chametz. So if you get malchus for eating it on Pesach, it certainly sounds like it's chametz. So again, what's Rab Zera shayla? Elo, says the Gemara, the Rab Yehuda, the Rab Yehuda. The shayla was Rab Yehuda's seer, which is when it starts developing, according to Rab, not according to Rab Meir, according to Rab Yehuda, where you don't get malchus. Certainly there's no chorus, but at the same time you can't eat it on Pesach. And the shayla is, how did Rabbi Yehuda look at this seer? What are the two tzadim? Sveika hava, was Rabbi Yehuda not sure whether seer is chametz or matzah? Thus, Rabbi Yehuda said you can't eat it. But Rabbi Yehuda also, we're not going to give you malchus because you can't give malchus to somebody that doesn't have eir misafik. So if it's a suffik, then this person who said arei lachmei toida min chametz oy min matzah, he could be yaitza by bringing seer. Why? Because v'nafik memanavshach. Because either it's chametz or it's matzah. And his t'nai was either chametz or matzah. Or maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds it's a beria. It's like a bird that's betchilas atziyuv. It's like a palgus. It's a beria. It's a nishtain nishtaher. It's not matzah. It's not chametz. If it's not matzah and it's not chametz, for some reason it's also to eat on Pesach, there's no malchus, but the bottom line is, if someone says a real lie, lachmi toidim and a chametz and a matzah, you wouldn't be able to be yoitza. Says the Gemara, I don't understand this whole shayla. Meaning, Reb Zera's shayla, ha'imar real lie lachmi toida, and he said, I'm going to bring him in a chametz and a matzah. The question is, could he bring it from seer? And Reb Zera had this whole shayla. Says the Gemara, this is menachas 101. How in the world could you do something like this? Rav said, ha'imar real lie lachmi toida. Let's see somebody says, ha'reil lie lachmi toida. So what's the halacha? Mevi toida v'lach. You have to bring a regular carbon toida. No such thing as just bringing lachmi toida. It's not a real carbon. Rav Huna said it. He said if somebody says a real lachmi toida, you have to bring a regular carbon toida. Now, what's a regular carbon toida? You have to bring a carbon. It's a shlamim. It has its own shulchan aruch, but you bring a carbon shlamim. You bring 40 breads. 30 of the breads are matzah. 10 of the breads are chametz. So v'chivin the chayv toida. Once you have to bring a carbon toida, v'lachma, and obviously you have to bring breads together with the toida. Halayada hay gavri ichametz udalaisi matzah. Imatzu udalaisi chametz. So how is this going to play a role practically? If a person says arei lachmi toida, he has to bring a carbon toida. Once you have to bring a carbon toida, you have to bring 40 breads. 30 have to be matzah, 10 have to be chametz. How could you bring seer? You don't know if it's matzah, you don't know if it's chametz. On the tzad it's matzah, you might have too much matzah. If on the tzad it's chametz, you might have too much chametz. You don't know what's going on. At the end of the day, you're going to have to bring what you have to bring. So how is this going to play a practical role? Reb Zera almost sounded like he was saying a person who could make a neder. He says, I'm going to bring lachmi, just the breads, and I want it to be either chametz or matzah. So he could customize his lachmei toida offering, and we're going to go along with it. Okay, that's a nice shayla. If he said chametz or matzah, what about this in between? What about there's no such thing? The only way you bring lachmei toida is if you're bringing a carbon toida, and once you bring a carbon toida, you have to do what you have to do. The Torah tells you what you have to do. You have to bring 40 breads, 30 matzah, 10 chametz. So says the Gemara, where exactly is this going to play itself? The Gemara says, it's talking about where a person's not bringing his own carbon toida. Reuven has a friend Shimon, and Shimon has to bring a carbon toida, and Reuven says, I'm going to do Shimon a favor. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring on his behalf, I'm going to bring lachmi toida for him. Okay, says, how does that change anything? So at the end of the day, somebody has to bring a carbon toida, and that person can't be yoitza with the seer. So the Gemara says, you're right. Liftar. What he never said that this person never said he's going to use these breads so that his friend shouldn't pater his obligation to bring a carbon toida with it. Rather, he just said that I know my friend is bringing a carbon toida. I'm going to add to his carbon toida, in addition to what he has to bring, I'm going to add some breads. And the breads I'm going to add are going to be either mina chametz or mina matzah. That was the shayla. The shayla is, can you add it on or could you not add it on? But you're right, you can't fulfill an obligation of lachmei toida with this seer, because at the end of the day, if you have a chiyuv to bring a carbon toida, you have to do what the Torah tells you to do. It's 40 breads, 4 different minim, 3 of them are matzah, 10 of them are chametz. There's no way you can be yaitza with anything that is a suffix. Either way, again, so the theme here is a digression. We have a significant digression between here and the end of the parak. The last Mishnah said, Kasha b'toirim pasal b'bnei yoina. Kasha b'bnei yoina pasal b'toirim. Again, why are we talking about these birds? Because these are the 2 birds that are kasha to be brought as oifos in the Beis HaMikdash. We're learning Chulin, not Kachin, but the Mishnah had digressed and compared the halachas of Shchitas Oif Chulin versus Malikas Oif Kachin. But we had this idea: what's kasha to this is possible to that, and what's possible to this is kasha to that. So on that note, says the Mishnah: Kasha be'para, pasal be'egla. Kasha be'egla, pasal be'para. So para in this Mishnah means para aduma, and egla in this Mishnah means egla arufa. The way that you kill, the way you slaughter the para aduma does not work if you're trying to behead the egla arufa. And the way that the egla arufa was beheaded, that method would not work for the para aduma. And the Bryce explains, the Torah says that the para aduma required shchita. In fact, not only did the para aduma require shchita, but the Gemara says the para aduma, the shchita had to be done by a kohen, a lazar v'chuka ksiva, and even though shchita lavavoidehi, so shchita ordinarily is kasha bizarre, but the para aduma, ironically, the shchita had to be done dafka with a. But either way, para b'shchita kshera ba'arifa psula. What if they did an arifa? What if they took the cleaver that was used to behead the egla arufa, and that's the way they killed the para aduma? That's not going to be okay. Egla ba'arifa kshera b'shchita psula, and the egla is just the opposite. The egla, the Torah says va'arfu. You have to behead. It doesn't use a word the lashon shchita. Uses a different word. Thus, egla ba'arifa kshera b'shchita psula. Nimtzis, what comes out is kasha b'para pasal b'egla, kasha b'egla pasal b'para. Says the Gemara, v'tei para kshera ba'arifa b'kal v'chayim. I don't understand. L'chayim, you should be able to do arifa with the para aduma kal v'chayim. Uma egla shlei huchsha b'shchita huchsha ba'arifa. Madach egla where you can't do shchita, you can do arifa. Para huchsha b'shchita. A para where you could do shchita ein oidin shehuchsharu ba'arifa. So l'churu b'kal v'chayim from egla arufa. If you could do shchita for the para, certainly you should be able to do arifa. Amakra, the pasuk says v'shachat. It says v'shachat regarding the para aduma, and it says the word chukah. So chukah is one of the magic words that come up a lot in Kachin. V'shchita in ba'arifa loy. What does chukah teach me? Ma'akiv. So v'shachat and v'chukah. It has to be that way. There is no option to do it in any way other than shchita. So even though based on the midah, one of the Yudgul we read the Shatar in the Dreshus Pam of Kal V'chaymer, you would say that if you could do shchita by the para aduma, you could certainly do arifa with the para aduma. But at the same time, it says v'shachat and it says v'chukah. We learn from there v'shchita and ba'arifa like. Is that true? If the word chukah is so strong, meaning chukah always means ma'akev. But it means ma'akev on such a level that it takes away our ability to even darshan a kal v'chaymer. I mean, you can't darshan a kal v'chaymer to add something to what's mafurish in a pasuk. Once it says chukah, can't be. By Yom Kippur, we know everything is ma'akev, and the reason is because it says chukah. V'tanya went into the brayse of so chatas hagoyrol oisa chatas v'ein Hashem oisa chatas. So when the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur took the 2 serim, one was going to go to Hashem, it was going to be brought as a regular chatas pnimit, and the other one was going to go la'azazel. So the pasuk says, what determined which sa'ir went la'Hashem and which sa'ir went la'azazel? The goyrel. Ha-goyrel oisa chatas, ve'ein Hashem oisa chatas. She'yochav aloydino. The goyrel says, the Braisa, you would think, mikal v'chaymer, that if the Kohen Gadol didn't use a goyrel to determine the la'Hashem and the la'azazel, but rather he did it in the conventional method. He said, this one should be L'Hashem, this one should be L'Azazel. You would think it would work. Why? Kal v'chaymer. Throughout Seder Kachim, no such thing as using a goyrel to determine hektish. How do you make something hektish? You say with your mouth that you want this to be hektish. So makom shekidish hagoyrel eredin shekidish Hashem Talmud Lemin. That's why the Torah had to write extra words. So chatas, and we learn from there hagoyrel oisa chatas ve'ein Hashem oisa chatas. So you see that we need a pasuk to tell me that if the Kohen Gadol wants to determine L'Hashem, L'Azazel, not through Gairel, but rather through Hilchas Nadarim, by simply stating that this should be L'Hashem and this one should be L'Azazel, it's not okay. But you need a pasuk for it. Time of the Kasar Rachman of Asol Chatas. But had I not had the pasuk, Darshina and Kal V'chaymer, I would have darshaned Kal V'chaymer. What's the kasha? The kasha is that it says chukah by the avodah of Yom Kippur. And if chukah means that whatever it says in the parasha is ma'akev, and I can't even darshan a kal v'chomer to be marbe something more than it says in the pasuk, because no, if this is what it says, this is the way it's done. I hear it says make a girl, but I have a kal v'chomer that I don't have to make a girl. No, it says girl, it says chukah. Chukah means ma'akev. What do I need a pasuk to tell me that I can't make the lashem and the lazazel with Hilchas Nadarim? It says Chukah. Elamai, what do you see from here? That even though it says Chukah, but there's still Yud Gimel Midah Shatar in the Drashas Bam. There's still Kavachayim and this Hekish and this Binyanam and this Gzerishav. You still have Yud Gimel Midas. Chukah doesn't take away the ability to darshan Yud Gimel Midah Shatar in the Drashas Bam. If that's the case, as it relates to the Chukah that it says by the Avodim Yom Kippur, the same is going to be true by Parah Aduma. So again, Hadra Kushya Leduchte V'tehei Parak Sheira Barifa Mikavachayim. The Mishnah says Kasha bePara, Pasal beEgla, Kasha beEgla, Pasal ba'arufa, meaning that you could only do shchita with the paraduma, but you can't kill the paraduma with arifa. L'chayr, why not? Why don't you make a kal v'chayim? If arifa works for the egla arufa where shchita doesn't work, then certainly the paraduma which has shchita should have arifa. So the Gemara says you have to say another reason. Mi'et rachmana gabi egla. In the parish of egla arufa it says ha arufa with a hey ayidiyah, and we learn from this zayis ba'arifa vein acheres ba'arifa. So it's a limud not in the parsha of paraduma, but in the parsha of egla arufa. Only that. There's no other animal where you can ever kill with this process of arifa, and it should work okay. Therefore, even though based on the meat of kal v'chaymer, you would think that the paraduma should be kosher by arifa, but at the end of the day, it's not kosher. Says the Gemara. What about in the reverse? The Mishnah also said egla has to be done dafka by arifa. You can't do it with shchita. L'chura kal v'chaymer. Ma parshal yuchshar by arifa ksher b'shchita. Egla sheksher by arifa. Ain't it din shekuchshar b'shchita? I mean, you have this new mechudish way of killing the egla arufa. So you would think kal v'chaymer, the conventional way, should work. You certainly should be able to do shchita with the egla arufa, and it should be kosher. On Makra, it says va'arfu ha'egla, and we learn from there ba'arifa in b'shchita loy. Being that it says va'arfu ha'egla, we learn no, it has to be done dafka arifa, but not with shchita. Either way, exhale and 2, maybe 3 ha'aras. So the first thought. So the last Gemara that we just learned was comparing and contrasting the Parah Aduma and the Egla Arufa. And the Mishnah said that the Parah Aduma, the Torah says, needed to be killed via the method of shchita. It's actually a big chiddush. It had to be done dafka with the kohen. And whereas ordinarily, even shchita in the Beis HaMikdash, shchita lavavoidi, shchita ksher bazar, but when it came to the Parah Aduma, you needed shchita with the kohen. Elazav v'chuka ksivba. But regardless, the Parah Aduma needed to be killed, slaughtered in the conventional method of shchita, whereas the egla arufa, that had to be done not with shchita, but rather that had to be done with arif. And the Gemara said that based on the mid of kal v'chaymer, you would think that the paraduma should be kosher b'arifa, and the egla arufa should be kosher with shchita. And the Gemara said, you're right, but at the end of the day, there's psukim, and the psukim teach me that par is dafka b'shchita, and the egla arufa is dafka b'arifa. What was the pasuk that the Gemara brought that the egla arufa has to be done dafka ba'arifa, not b'shchita? This was the last line Gemara that we learned. Amakra va'arfu ha'egla ba'arifa in b'shchita line. What do you see in that pasuk? If you take a look at Rashi, va'arfu ha'egla, zokte look at Rashi, shina oleh hakosov la'akev. That really, it's not, that pasuk that the Gemara is bringing is the second time it says in the Torah, va'arfu, that you're supposed to do arifa. And we know there's a rule in Kachim, shina kosov la'akev, that any time the Torah says something twice, it's not just the katchila, it's ma'akev. Now, really, that's a big chiddush, shina hakasav la'akev, because ordinarily you don't need shina hakasav to be ma'akev, right? Your person can't say, I know it says in the Torah, you're not allowed to eat whatever, but it only says once. So once, it's like a tchila. It's a very nice thing to do. If you show it to me twice, then I'll have a shina hakasav la'akev. No, usually if the Torah says something, it's ma'akev. Unless you have a real reason to assume that the Torah didn't mean at leikuva, of course you assume that it means leikuva. It's dafka by kachim, there's a chiddush, that if it says something once, we assume it's only the katchila. Kachim has its own shulchan aruch. One of the important rules are shina hakasav la'akev. It comes up over and over and over and over and over again in all the drushes and the limudim of zvachim and menachas, that it needs to be, says the Gemara, you want to know how I know arifa is ma'akev, because it doesn't just say it once, it says it twice. And the truth is that at first glance, it would therefore seem that the egla arufa was kachim. If the makar that Arif is ma'akiv, because it says it not once, twice. And Rashi invokes the terminology that's used throughout Seder Kachim of Shina Kasav La'akiv. It certainly sounds like what Rashi is saying is that this is a Kachim Sugya, and I have it twice. Once I have it twice, the halach is it's going to be ma'akiv. But the truth is, if you think about it, is that so pashut? This egel that was brought during the Egla Arufa process, was it kachim or was it not kachim? Now, at first glance, sounds like it, right? It was brought for kapara, kapar lamchi Yisrael. That was the nusach that the Ziknei Ir used to say, and it was an animal. But really, after further analysis, it's not so clear. What happened? What happened was they found a corpse, ki matzi chalal, and they don't know who killed this person. So the Torah describes a very esoteric, ritualistic kind of process. The Zekanim, the elders that live in the city closest to where this dead body was found, have to go out to a nachal esan. It has to be a place where nothing ever grew, and they have to take a certain type of egel. A calf has to be of a certain age. They go, they recite a text, and they kill this calf. They kill it. How do they kill it? Arifa, using this very, very precise process. And they say that by us doing this, somehow there should be a kapara in the Ilamos for this terrible avera of shvichas damim that took place. Now, this did not happen in the Beis HaMikdash. There's no mention anywhere of this going down as a kachim diga halacha. So if that's the case, at first glance, you could certainly argue that maybe what's going on over here is not really kachim at all. It sounds like kachim. From a distance, from a 20,000 foot view, it seems like a kachim diga parsha. But when you start going through the details, what's kachim over here? It's not going on in the Beis HaMikdash. There's no mention anywhere of being makdish this animal. What kedusha does it have? It's a chatas? It's an oil? What is it exactly? So l'chura, Rashi says Shina Kasav La'akiv. It seems like it's a little bit of a chiddush. I saw Reb Chaim Kanievsky wrote a sefer called Nachal Esan. So it's a sefer on Egla Rufa, and in Simin Hey, in a sefer Nachal Esan, he has a tremendous arichos. Yesh lachkar. Egla Rufa, is it kachim or is it not kachim? And Kedarkei Bakodesh, he brings so many rayas, but just one ha'ara that he brings, that's a very well-known Gemara. The Gemara Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Chav Tesam Beis, it actually came up in the Daf not so long ago. The Gemara over there is discussing Yayin Nesach, and Yayin Nesach, of course, is Aser B'Shtia. It's also Aser B'Ana. Says the Gemara Yayin Minolan. How do you know that Yayin Nesach is Aser B'Ana? Amar Rabbi Baravu Amakra. It's learned out from the following pasuk: Asher Chelev Zivachema Yoichelu Yishtu Yayin Nesicha. The pasuk compares its makish Yayin Nesach and karbanos that are brought l'avodah zarah. Ma zevach asabana. So just like if somebody brings a sacrifice to avodah zarah, it's asabana. Af yayinami asabana. So wine is also going to be yayin nesach is also asabana. V'zevach kufa minol. How do you know that zevach is asabana? It's learned out from a different pasuk. Vayitzmedu lebal pa'ar vayoichlu mizivchei mesim. Ma meis asabana. Just like a mace is asabana. Af zevach nami asabana. Zevach is like a mace. Umeis kufa minol. How do you know that a mace is asabana? As yesham sham yegla rufa. It's learned out from Xer Shav from Egla rufa. Ksivach it says vatama sham Miriam. V'ksiv hasam and it says va'arfu sham is egla v'nachal. Ma'ala halan asabana. Afkanami asabana. Says the Gemara, bottom line, how do you know that Yayin Nesach is asabana? Because Yayin Nesach is hookish to a zevach that's brought l'avodah zarah. A zevach that's brought l'avodah zarah is hookish to a mace, and a mace is learned out Gzeir Shava from Egla Rufa. Now we know one of the more complicated sugis of Masechtas Zvachim was with Perek Ezeu Neshech was Dover Halamed Behekish. So ordinarily in Kol HaTorah Kula you can learn A from B and then B from C and C from D, right? This from a Hekish, that from a Gzeir Shava, this from a Kal V'Chomer, this from a Binyan Av. You could have this long shalsheles of dry. It all works. It's fine as long as everything stims. It's not a big deal. But in Kachim it's not so simple. There's a rule Dover Alamid Behekish. And then there's a whole sugya where the Gemara gets involved. What about a davar halamid b'gzeir shava? Davar halamid b'gzeir shava, is that chayzer or malamid b'hekish? And on one side on the Gemara, that's not something that works. If that's the case, how do you understand this Gemara by the Zohar right here? If you're going to tell me that Egla Arufa is kachim, said how could Egla Arufa teach me that just like it's asabahana, so to a mace is asabahana, then a mace is going to teach my idea hekish. If a mace is asabahana, then zivche mason, quote unquote. Then if you bring a carbon to a avodah zarah, it's asabahana, which is then going to teach me, if a zevach avodah zarah is asabahana, then yayin nesach is also asabahana zarah. You're going to trip up with that sugya neizeu neshach, and Reb Chaim makes the cheshbon, according to which Rishonim it's a problem. But the bottom line is, this is something that you find in a few places in Shas, where the Gemara learns halachas from Egla Arufa. Bishloim, if it's a chulin diga parsha, then I I understand. But if it's a kachim de parsha, then at first glance we're gonna have a little bit of an issue. That's one of Reb Chaim's rayas. Just one ha'ara I was thinking is that the Ramban in Parshas Achrimos famously discusses the Sar La'azazel. So the Gemara just mentioned the Sar La'azazel, and Yom Kippur there were two seirim that was brought: Sar Echad Hashem, v'Sar Echad La'azazel. And Ibn Ezra says that the Sar Echad Hashem was a regular carbon. What about the Sar Echad Azazel? So it says that Ibn Ezra, I can't tell you what it is. Now, if you're smart, you'll realize that it's not a regular carbon, because if it was a regular carbon, it would also be Lashem. Right? Sar Echad Hashem, and the other Sar doesn't go Lashem. It goes Lazazel. Says that Ibn Ezra, he gives you ramazim, hints, and clues 33 when you'll be 33 years old. He doesn't want to tell you what it is. But the Ramban went on, he says, I'm going to tell you what it is. He says the Sar Lazazel wasn't a carbon, it wasn't a krava to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was a krava to Azazel. One was Lashem, the other one was not Hashem, it was Azazel. He says Azazel is Sarish Alesav, it's the Samach Mem, and being that it's Yom Kippur, and in Yom Kippur the Samach Mem is Mekatrig, so that the Yidden shouldn't get kapara. So what we do is we give him some Sheichat, right? With Esav, it always goes with Sheichat. This is in the Ramban at the beginning of Parshas Vayishlach Yaakov Mincha, Ma'asav, a similar banim, that with Esav, it smears with Sheichat. And that's what we're doing. We're being Meshachid on the Sarai level. Sarish Alesav is getting Sheichat, we're giving him a carbon, that's the Sar Lazazel. It's like this, we should get kapara. At the very end of this shtickle, says the Ramban, Umipnei zeh amru Rabbi Seinu. He says, with this you could understand the oimek in Divrei Chazal, the eschu koisai, say Chazal to teres kayanim, dvarim sheyitzahar mekatrim. What's a chayk? Chayk is the mitzvahs that the Yitzhahara drives us crazy. Why? Levisha shatnes upara aduma v'sara mishtalech. They come after us. The umay sa'olam do, and the Yitzhahara says, "Really? You keep mitzvahs? What are you doing? You doing shatnes? Does that make sense to you? You're bringing a para aduma? Does that make sense? The sara mishtalech. You bring the sara mishtalech." Says the Ramban, "V'loy matzu b'karbanis tshuva l'umay sa'olam." Why didn't they bring? They have a problem with the para aduma and the sara mishtalech. What about a regular carbon? How come they have no issue with a regular carbon? He says, "No. V'loy matzu b'karbanis tshuva l'umay sa'olam." Kihem alisha Hashem. When a regular carbon, they understand. Regular carbon is a carbon. They're only coming after us with the Sar Mishtalech. Why? Because it looks like Avodah Zarah. We look like we're pagans. What are we doing? We're going to a mountain. This is not in the Beis HaMikdash. It doesn't even have to be a kohen, the person that threw the Sar down the mountain. And we're bringing a hakrava. It looks like we're doing what they're doing. And as a result, that's something that they attack us for. And the same is true with the paraduma. The inyana doimeli in Yisar Mishtalech, lahave ruach tuma, etc. Either way, that's the yisoid, it says the Ramban, of why this is true. Why they come after us, not for all karbanos. They understand karbanos, they get it. It's a temple, it's a house of worship. But the paraduma and the Yisar Mishtalech, that's not something that makes sense to them. And as a result, that's what they're minus. So it bothered me. Why didn't the Teres Kayanim also mention Egla Rufa? If you're going to sit down now and you're going to write down karbanos, quote unquote, that were brought outside of the Makam HaMikdash. So you're going to get the paraduma. That's true. It was brought on Har HaZesim. It was on Har HaMishcha. You're going to have the sar that was brought in the mountain in the Midbar. You have the Egla Rufa. The Egla Rufa was also. You're bringing an animal. You're doing a shchita. There's this whole process. Kapar Lamcha Yisrael. How come the Egla Rufa wasn't brought? Maybe it's a raya that the Egla Rufa wasn't kachim. If it was kachim, then it's a kasha. I don't understand. You're bringing a carbon out. See, the sar Mishtalech was a carbon chatos. The sar Mishtalech was a carbon. You had two seirim. They were two chatos. You had to even make a girl to decide which one was going to be Lashem and which one was going to be Lazazel. But they were certainly both karbanos, right? The para aduma also. There's a whole discussion in the Gemara. Kachim and Gabayis, Kachim Esbeya, Chatas Kayu Rachmana throughout Shas. The para aduma Shaloi Lishma is possible because the Chatas, right? Chatas Kayu Rachmana. But the Egla Aru wasn't carved. So if it wasn't Kachim, it's Gishmak. Why the Teres Kayanim doesn't mention it? It could be this Ramban, this diuk in the Ramban. The Ramban brings us Teres Kayanim that says the Umay Sa'olam Amashivan Aleim Dafka para aduma and Sarah Mishtalech. You would think that the Egla Rufa belongs on this list. Why not? Maybe it's because it's not. The crowd was, what about this Rashi? You have a Mufurish Rashi. Right, Rashi says Shina Kosav Lakiv. Doesn't Shina Kosav Lakiv sound like it's Kachim? But the Teretz is Pashut says Hagoyin Rav Chaim Kanievsky. He says the Teretz is because the Gemara really had a Kal V'Chaymer. There was a Kal V'Chaymer over here that said that you should learn out that Shchita should work for the Egla Rufa. I mean, Shchita always works. So you would think by the Egla Rufa, if you could do Arifa, certainly Shchita. So to answer the Kal V'Chaymer, the Torah went ahead and told me
Arifa a second time, so that you should have learned from Kal V'chomer. Meaning, had you not had a Kal V'chomer, for Urfu one time would have been enough to teach me that Arifa is Makif, because it's taken not a Kachim de Gebarsha. And if the Egla Rufa is not Kachim, then I don't need a Shina HaKasav L'Akiv. The only reason we need a Shina HaKasav L'Akiv is because otherwise you'd have the Kal V'chomer. We simply needed to address the Kal V'chomer. That's the first Torah. The second order is, so we said you can't do shchita with the Egla Rufa. Egla Rufa had to be done dafka by Rifa, but you were not able to do shchita. Stating that, there's a very interesting Tosfos, and this Tosfos is in Masechtas Yuma, daf Samach Daled Amud Aleph. It's also later in Masechtas Chulin, daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph. Just a little bit of a background. The context is Yuma Samach Gimel Amud Beis, where the Gemara is discussing that there's a psul of Mechusar Zman when it comes to the Sar HaMishtalech. So yesterday we spoke about Mechusar Zman, that carbon has to be at least 8 days old. It's Miyei Mashmini Vahala, Yeratza. It has to experience one Shabbos, just like a child has to experience a Shabbos before it has Bris Milah. Taz says that's the Makar to the Shalom Zachar. So too, there's an idea that a carbon, it has to greet the Matruna before it's able to come Lifnei HaMelech as a carbon. So there's a concept of Miyei Mashmini Vahala Yeratza. And the Gemara says that this halacha, Miyei Mashmini Vahala Yeratza, is true even for the Sar HaMishtalech. Sar HaMishtalech was a carbon. And being that it was on some level treated like a carbon, so there's a concept of Mechusar Zman. Says the Gemara, not only is there a concept of Mechusar Zman as it relates to Sar HaMishtalech, there's also a concept of Oisoi ve'espenoi lo sishchatu b'yoyim echad. So we know there's a halacha that you're not allowed to shech a mother and its son on the same day. Rava in Yuma Daf Samach Daled Amud Aleph says that the same is going to be true for a Sar HaMishtalech as well. So we're coming in really in the middle of a sugya. So it's just one excerpt. Rava Amar that what would be if somebody had a Chayla B'Teich Beisai? So Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to shech Yom Kippur. So technically this conversation should be moot. But no, there was a Chayla She'esh Beisakana, and the doctors and the rabbis all said, no, we have no choice. We have to shecht an animal on Yom Kippur for this chayla sheyesh b'yisakana. Now it turns out that this animal, how this happened, but this animal's son was the Sar HaMishtalech, the Sar HaMishtalech. So what do you do now? There's a halacha of oisei v'espenoi lo'isishchatu b'yom echad. Says Rav, it's a problem. So, bro, you cannot bring you're going to have another sar. You can't use it. Because it's halacha. You're not allowed to shech. You just shechted the mother. You can't shech the mother and the son on the same day. Freak the Gemara, the obvious question. Why is it a problem? The Torah says, this is not shchita. Amri b'ma'arava, says the Gemara. You ready? It's true. It's true, it's not shchita. What you're going to do is you're going to push it down the mountain. But pushing the Sar HaMishtalech down the mountain is the equivalent thereof of shchita. And if it says in the Torah, oisei v'esbenoi le'sishchatu b'yom echad, it doesn't mean shchita dafka. It means whatever you're supposed to do with this animal. And if what you're supposed to do with this animal is d'chiyasei l'tzuk, then d'chiyasei l'tzuk su is shchitasei. And it's going to be included in the loisasei of oisei v'esbenoi le'sishchatu b'yom echad. What came to mind was the Gemara in Chulin, daf Yudzayin Amud Aleph, the Gemara that we learned last week, where the Gemara said that according to Rabbi Akiva, there was no shchitas Chulin when the Yidden were in the Midbar. Mechira was okay. It says, Atzoin v'habakar yishachet, and Parashas Baal Loitzcha. Right, Moshe says, you're going to bring slav? Who's going to shecht all these animals? Frank the Gemara, according to Rabbi Akiva, we don't shecht chulin anyways. So says the Gemara, no. That Nechira before Matan Torah was Shchita. Shchita doesn't mean Shchita the way we know it. That's only shchita because that's the only way you're allowed to do it. But if there was another method, then that would also be okay. Not only would it be okay, but it would be inclusive in the term, in the technical, legal definition of what shchita is. It says the Gemara, Dichi yasoi litzuk, zui shchitasei, and when it says, Oisei vespenoi le'sishchatu b'yom echad, you're able to do it with shchita as well. Zok Tosfos, that if that's true, as it relates to Dichi yasoi litzuk, I think the same is going to be true with regards to Egla Rufa as well. Meaning, after the Ziknei Ha'ir went and they beheaded the Egel in the Egla Rufa process, I think says Tosfos, Arifasa, Zuhi Shchitasa. And if there's a halacha of Oisei v'espenoi as it relates to the Sar HaMishtalech, you can have a halacha of Oisei v'espenoi as it relates to the Egla Rufa as well. And says Tosfos, I think I have a raya. I have a raya from the Gemara Masechtes Zvachim Daf Ayin Amud Beis in Perek Chata Sa'oif. The Gemara over there says that after the Ziknei Ha'ir did the Egla Rufa, so even though the Egel oil is asabana, etc. But it's not tameh. There's no tumas nevela. And the lashon Gemara is arifasa mitaheres midei nevela. That the arifa of the egla arufa is mitaher this egel from egla arufa. Why is it mitaher from egla arufa? Shchita is from tumas nevela. Shchita is mitaher from nevela. A nevela is tam. In addition, for a nevela being asabachila, right? We know this. It's also metame b'mago b'masa. If something is shchut, it's not metame b'mago b'masa. L'chayra shchita has an ability to be mitzi something from tumas nevela. But arifa, why should arifa be mitaheres midei nevela? Says Toysus, you know what the pshat is? I think the teretz is this Gemara in Yuma Daf Samech Dalet and Aleph. That the Gemara says d'chiyasei letzuk zui shchitasei arifasa zui shchitasa. And if shchita is mitaher midei nevela, then l'chayra arifa is going to be mitaher midei nevela as well. And if that's the case, says Toysus, who I think you're going to have an oisei v'espenoi leisishcha tu b'yay mechad. So just two ha'aras. The first ha'ara is that we spoke out of Teres Chaim in the beginning of the week, where the Teres Chaim said that the reason shchita is mitaheres midei nevela has nothing to do with the shchita per se. But the point is because shchita is a mitzvah. I mean that shchita is a mitzvah, so when a yid does a mitzvah, the koichoi satuma, the sitra achra, the malach hamuves, they all run away. They're beireach min kedusha. They don't want to have anything to do with it. So if an animal dies, it dies al yedei the malach hamuves. Like the Gemara says a perika machkid malach hamuves malihacha malihasa. Being that the malach hamuves is tuma that brings tumas nevela. That's why when a person dies, there's tumas meis. It all comes mikoyach the malach hamuves. But if you do shchita, being that shchita is a mitzvah, so the mitzvah shchita causes the malach hamuves to run away, and that's why there's no tumas nevela. If that's the case, I don't think you have a raya from the Gemara in Zvachim Davayin Amid Beis. From the fact that the Gemara says Arifa mitaheres midei nevela, that Arifasa zui shchitasa. Maybe Arifasa is not shchita. Meaning, who said Arifa shchita? Why is there no tumas nevela? Because even if Arifa is not shchita, Arifa is a mitzvah. The Torah says this is what you're supposed to, no less a mitzvah than shchita chulin, right? So if shchita chulin is mitaheres midei nevela, why? Simply because of the kedusha of the act of shchita chulin. The Yid is following Yori Gatzmicha, right? He's not just going ahead and living his life b'shviris libi elech. No, he understands before you meet a chicken, you have to follow a process. He's being a heilige yid, and as a result, the koyach hatuma can't deal with this. He runs away. There's no malach hamavis, no tumas nevela. So why should a rifa be any different? Tais is saying that if there's no tumas nevela by the egla rufa, that's a raya that just like the Gemara says d'chiyasei letzuk zui shchitasei, that arifasa zui shchitasei as well. Maybe there's no raya. Maybe arifa is not shchita. So as it relates to oisei vesbenoi loisishchatu. Maybe you're not going to have that halacha. With regards to Arifa mitaheres midei nevela, that's because why should Arifa be any worse than Shchita? Why is Shchita mitaheres midei nevela? If it was a din that Shchita is mitaheres midei nevela, then it's geschmack. Then you have a raya from the Gemara in Zvachim that Arifa must be Shchita. And if it's Shchita with regards to there being no tumas nevela, let it be Shchita regarding Oisei Vesbenai. Like Shchita be Yamechad. But Loite Teres Chaim, the reason Shchita is mitaheres midei nevela, it's not because of the ritual process of Shchita. It's simply because Shchita is a mitzvah. If Shchita is a mitzvah, then why should Arifa be any different? L'chura, Arifa is not any less a mitzvah. That's the first star. The second star is the Minchas Chinuch's famous kasha. And the Minchas Chinuch is in the end of mitzvah Nun Beis, and his kasha is based on a Gemara, Masechtas Bava Kama, Daf Mem Aleph Amar Aleph, Huva Barashi Ala Torah, in Parshas Mishpatim. The pasuk over there says, V'chiyigach shoir es ish. Oh yes, Yishav Ameis. Feels like a long time ago. Sokol Yisokol Hashar. V'lo yeyachel es besarai. Ubal Hashar Naki. So Kiigach Sharish Hashar killed a person. So immediately Sokol Yisokol Hashar says we're at the flesh. Tachlis, could we eat the meat? You're not allowed to eat the meat. Freik the Gemara. Mi mashmash in masakul yisakul ashar. Any ader sheneveli. V'nevela asur ba'achilo. Ma tamaloi lo yachal es b'sari. Why does the Torah have to say lo yachal es b'sari? Says the Gemara magad l'cha kasav. You know what's coming to teach me? Shem shachtoi la'achar shenigmar dinoi. Asabach. It's coming to teach me an unbelievable chiddush. A chiddush that we all know from learning Bava Kama, and that is that a shar haniskel is asabachil. It's asabano. Meaning, even if you would shech the shar haniskel, once it's nigmar dinoi. If you shechte with a chalif and with the shia and adrasa and the chal, do everything perfect, doesn't matter. Still also b'achila. For lo yachal b'sari is not referring to after the skila. After the skila, it's an avela. It didn't have shchita. What it means is before freikte minchas chinuch a bum bekasha, and he concludes this kasha as v'tzorich ian rochav. So you see tzorich in gadol, tzorich in katan, v'tzorich ian reish ches vez. But either way, it says that minchas chinuch. I never understood this Gemara. You have a Gemara in Yuma. Samach Dalet Amar Aleph, where the Gemara says, "Dichi Yasei Litzuk zuhi shchitasai. That taking the sar lazazel and pushing it down the mountain is the equivalent of shchita, even though it's not shchita, but it doesn't matter. Zui shchitasa. It's a maisa shchita. There's no Thomas Nevela. There's, if it wasn't kachim, it'd be mutter b'achila maybe. You have the halacha of oisoi vespanoid, like sishchatu b'yonechad. The entire hilcha shchita applies. There was a maisa shchita done. The chiyasei letzuk, zui shchitasa. The same is true, says Tosis regarding the egla rufa. Says Tosis, if chiyasei letzuk, zui shchitasa, arifasa, zui shchitasa. And Tosis, by the way, have a raya from a gemara in Zvach and Daf where you see that arif is mataris, midei nevela. So you see that arifasa, zui shchitasa as well. What's the tzadashava between chiyasei letzuk and arifasa? You're doing what the Torah told you to do. What's shchita? Shchita is the Torah says kill it this way. Okay, here the Torah said kill it al yidei tchiyah letzuk. Here the Torah said kill it al yidei arifa. And as long as you do what the Torah says you're supposed to do, that's the technical definition of what shchita doesn't mean. Shchita's roifsima. It's not the point. The point is it's following what the Torah said. And if it's following what the Torah said, chiyasa letzuk zui shchitasa, arifasa zui shchitasa. If that's the case, there would have been a real havamina to think that if it says suckle, you suckle hashar, maybe you're allowed to eat the meat. Because why don't you say skilasa zui shchitasa? What's the difference between the skila, where the Torah says stone this shar, versus where the Torah says tchiyasa letzuk, or the Torah says va'arfu asayit? In all cases, you're doing what the Torah told you to do. And if you're following the mitzvahs Hashem, and that's the definition of shchita, so l'chayr vos freik the Gemara, that be mashmash and amasakal yisakal ashar, any yedei shenaveli, unaveli asur b'achila, zakta mechachna, no, any yedei, Taka don't know that it's asur b'achila. What do you mean? You didn't do shchita. I know I didn't do shchita, but I did what the Torah told me to do. I did skila, and the Torah said sakal yisakal ashar. And as long as I do what the Torah says, I know from Yuma Samach Dalet and Toisus over there, and Toisus and Chulin Daf Bebeis, who has a raya from Zvach and Daf Ayin, this is Kant Shas. I know that as long as I do what the Torah tells me to do, that is the legal, technical definition of shchita. So if that's the case, l'chayra vas zok the Gemara, that once you do skila with a shar and niskal, it's pshita that it's an avela, and I don't even need a pasuk to tell me v'lo yachalas b'sarai. So much so that the Gemara darshans the words v'lo yachalas b'sarai and teaches me halacha revacha b'Yisrael, that a shara niskal is asa b'achila, asa b'ana, even if you do shchita with it before the skila. L'chayra, maybe the reason the Torah had to say v'lo yachalas b'sarai is lahaitzi milibon, that you shouldn't think that tchiyasa letzuk zui shchitasa, arifasa zui shchitasa, maybe skilasa zui shchitasa as well. Either way, a festive kasha l'michas chinuch v'ru'uyin hadvarim l'misha amram.